Area Development Corporation's second legislative forum, and thank you for joining us this morning. Beautiful morning, by the way. Thank you, first of all, to DMAC and Joel Lundstrom for hosting our event today. This wonderful surroundings. We appreciate the opportunity to connect with the public with your legislators. I'm Steve Kopetsky with the Legislative Committee at the Chamber, and I'll be the moderator for today's forum. Before we start, would you rise and join me in our pledge? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The format for today's program will include opening statements, prepared questions that have been submitted to the Chamber, and then we will also be submitting or asking for questions from the audience. The forum will take approximately 1 hour, and before we get started, I'd like to introduce Senator Craig Williams to my left, and Representative Brian Best. Thank you both for attending today's forum. You both have 5 minutes for your opening statements, so Representative Best, would you like to go first? Sure.
Good morning, everybody. I've got 5 minutes to speak to you about some of the stuff that's been going on down at the State House, and so I thought I would just run through some of the bills that we've been working on, and I've got about 6 here I'm just going to touch on. These are bills that did make it through funnel, which now it means that they're eligible to go to the floor and be signed by the governor. One that I think there's great interest in is House Study Bill 709, the bottle bill as we know it. That's one that we've literally kicked the can down the road, and no pun intended, but it is what we have been doing for ever since I've been elected. This is my 8th year. We've talked about it every year and nothing's gotten done. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, we're at a critical stage where if we don't get something done, the whole system will implode. 1 cent is not enough for the retention centers. I don't believe they need to have 2 cents. And with that, I believe we'll see even maybe a few more redemption centers than what the state has right now. It's a very complicated bill, and the problem with it is it's deciding who has to take the cans or who can take the cans and bottles. And rightfully so, I believe that grocery stores and convenience stores, I can understand why it's a problem when they're cooking food and doing things like that, and they get a big sack of cans and bottles that come in, and sometimes they've been sitting out in the machine shed for a while, and there's possibly rodents and everything else you can imagine coming out of those sacks. And so I do think we have to try to figure out a way to get enough redemption centers throughout the state of Iowa where we don't have deserts where those redemption centers could take on that task throughout the state of Iowa. So that's one that we're going to be working on. Another bill that I talk about almost every year is House Study Bill 623, which limits what the pharmacy benefit managers can do I shouldn't say what they do to the small town pharmacies throughout the state of Iowa. And what you have here is what they call vertical integration. And so an insurance company owns their own pharmacy benefit manager network who owns their own pharmacies. And so you see that through most of the national pharmacies that we see now. And the pharmacy benefit managers, there's 3 of them out there that own 85% of the market. So if you're a small town pharmacy, you have no choice but to join their network, because without it you get zero business because they steer all that. And obviously when you own all 3 of those entities, it's a very unfair playing field for small town pharmacies, and we need to get something done with that because it's really putting them at risk. Another one that I've just brought this one up mainly because I enjoy beer, so I thought I'd talk about this one. This is House Study Bill 649, which allows it allows restaurants and bars to go out and purchase a small limited amount of beer at a grocery store or wherever they want to go. Right now, it's illegal for them to do that. But the problem is if a distributor doesn't get the beer to that bar on time, they actually run out of beer. And what choice do you have on a Saturday evening when you run out of Busch Light? And under the law right now, you would have to say, well, I just don't have any Busch Light. Or you just never know. Sometimes you get a huge crowd that you weren't expecting. So that's just another one of that's not a big one, but that's another one we're working on. I actually wrote and introduced a bill that did make it through the funnel. It's House File 2311, and it prevents Chinese ownership of Iowa property. And I think it's something that we need to talk about. I think it's naive of us to think that China is our friend in any way, shape, or form. And I think what this does is just opens up the conversation. The bill did make it through subcommittee and it made it through committee. I'm not managing the bill because it's not in my committee. It's just my idea. And another one for all you folks out there that get a little upset when you get stuck at a traffic crossing and the train just won't move. We have trains up now that go up to about 15,000 feet length. And what this bill does is it keeps the train length at a maximum of 8,600 feet. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is that if you block traffic for a long amount of time, obviously it can be a problem for emergency services and stuff to get from one side of Carroll to the other. And one reason that I really like this bill is just telling the train companies, hey, can't you at least get out of the town? You know, for some reason they stop right in the middle of Carroll. They do it in Glidden when there's 7 miles of unfettered railroad right in front of them between the two towns. It always just confuses me why they do that. And then there's a bill that would make the 90,000 pound weight limitation, instead of it being a harvest proclamation that the governor does every year, just to put it in effect year round. And hands-free again is in the Transportation Committee, and I fully believe this is a good bill. It just says that you have to have your hands free of a phone. Right now, we have a non-texting bill, but that's a little bit hard, very difficult actually, for a patrolman or a policeman to know what the intent is when that guy's got the phone in his hands. He might be texting, he might be trying to dial a phone number. Dialing a phone number would not be a violation, but texting would be. So what this does is it just makes it so you need to get a Bluetooth, and Bluetooths are available. They're very inexpensive. But what I believe is I've seen some of the footage in the films of people that they know it was texting or it was phone distraction that caused some really, really bad accidents. And so if we believe that you shouldn't be impaired by drunk driving, why would we allow you to go into a car and be messing with your phone, distracted, and cause an accident that not only can cause injury and death to that person, but to the innocent people that are ran over by this and accidents that might happen. So that's all I've got on the new bills. There's a lot of them, but these are the ones that I thought would be interesting.
Thank you very much. Senator Williams?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I was late. I had another forum this morning at Storm Lake. I didn't drive from Storm Lake. I was on a Zoom call with those folks for a little bit this morning, and it caused me to be a little bit tardy here to the forum, so my apologies. So last week was funnel week, and any bills that didn't make it through subcommittee and committee by last week won't be considered, at least at this time. We'll be debating next week on a plethora of bills that have made it through the funnel process. Brian hit on a couple of them here that are somewhat dear to my heart, even though they're not in the committees that I'm in. One is the bottle bill. We had it in Commerce the other day, and one of the bottle bills, there's a bunch of them that float around, right? So one of the bottle bills got killed in Commerce in favor of a different bottle bill that's over in another committee at this point. And I'm not as familiar with that one. I think it is a more complicated one. To me, it's we keep continuously complicating an uncomplicated process. There's more than enough money in the nickel that you folks pay on a bottle or a can to pay the redemption centers 2 cents out of that nickel, and you still get your nickel back. It's because of how many cans don't make it through the process. There's a pile of nickels, and those nickels are not taxed. They're held by distributors, and they don't get used for the appropriate reasons. So I am very much in favor of moving that from 1 cent to the redemption center to 2 cents to the redemption center. I kind of don't care less who pays for it. It's either going to be the retailer or the wholesaler, but it's not going to be you. You've already paid it. So when that got killed in commerce the other day, that was my first question is, okay, so if we're going to do this other one, don't tell me we're going to leave this chamber at the end of this year and for one more year say, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't get a bottle bill through. It's just ridiculous that we can't get this one done. It's been, was it 30 years or 40? I think it's 40. 40 years of exactly the same thing. And we're always fortunate here because we have a couple of places to take them here in Carroll County. Audubon's got one, there's one in Sac, and I think there's one in BV. But for some reason, my counties have bottle redemption centers and most other counties don't. There's some places where you can't find any place to take these cans back, and so those nickels pile up because there's no place to take them. Strangely enough, once again, the Sierra Club has said that they're not in favor of the bottle bill because it moves, there's a range. It says if there's a redemption center within 10 minutes of a grocery store, the grocery store doesn't have to take it back. And I think the bill changes it from 10 minutes to 15 miles. Well, they don't like that because who wants to travel 15 miles to take their cans back? I don't travel 15 miles to take my cans back. I travel 15 miles to do something else, and my cans come with me for that purpose, right? So I don't think that that's a very good excuse to, yet again, not have a bottle bill. I did suggest to the Sierra Club that in those areas where 15 miles is too far, perhaps at 2 cents a can, they could set up their own redemption center, make a nice fundraiser out of it, and do some community service for them. I think it's a good idea. I mean, they could, if the grocery stores don't want to take them, set up your own and make the 2 cents and use that as a fundraiser. I think that's a reasonable solution for them to help the community out. Also got involved in, I don't get as good and exciting of bills presented to me and in my committees as Brian does. I get these mundane banking bills and credit union bills and insurance bills that most people, it just doesn't impact their life very much, but it has to be done behind the scenes. Working on some municipal utilities bills, there was a bill that came up that I was involved in that, it really happened in Indianola. Mayor fired the utilities board. Actually, the mayor lost the election, and the day after the election fired the utility board members. They're appointed members, so they kind of have the right to fire them, but it was kind of a retributionary thing. And so this bill came up and said, mayors can no longer fire utility board members without a court order. Well, that's kind of overkill, right? Now we got to go to a judge every time something goes wrong. And I think, like in the city of Manning contacted me about it and said, well, we don't have this issue here. Mayor can't just fire a utility board member. They got to go to the city council. Well, not every town has that. So, I'm trying to get the compromise through on this bill to say, you're not going to a judge for it. The mayor can fire them with the approval of the city council. And I think this is an appropriate approach, right? And if that doesn't work out, then I guess we can go to the next step to court. But why in the world do you have to go to court? The other side of that issue, of course, is like in the city of Des Moines, the Des Moines Water Works spent $1 million, well, probably a lot more than that, suing a couple of counties here over a water issue here some years ago without the city's permission. So they used city resources to do the lawsuit and lost, and the mayor couldn't do anything about it. So the mayor wants to be able to terminate utility board members that go rogue. So that's the other side of it, right? I said in the last forum that Brian skipped out on, by the way, at the last forum, and I said that it's always whose ox is getting gored today, right? And you try to look at these bills and say, what problem are we trying to solve? Who benefits? Who loses? Does one outweigh the other? Sometimes the loser doesn't even know that they're about to lose, so you really have to look at it carefully. In regards to the bottle bill, back on that again, sorry, but there's no less than 3, maybe 4 different lobbyists that approach me on a regular basis about the bottle bill, and they're from the distributor side of the thing. And the redemption centers have 0. Because they're not making any money today, how in the world are they going to pay for a lobbyist to come and see us and talk about it, right? So they can't do it. So you have to look at who's benefiting, who's losing, and how can you mitigate those differences. It's interesting to me all the time on whose ox is getting gored today, and the different perspectives that they might have on some of these issues. What else? I had a bill, an insurance bill, that if a house burns down, if your house burns down and you have insurance today, the insurance company is required to withhold $10,000 of your insurance payment in case the city has to clean the mess up. You skip town and the city has to clean it up. That's been on the books for 40 years now, 30 years it's been on the books. And the bill would increase that from $10,000 to $20,000. Let's face it, you're not going to clean up a campfire. Well, you can clean up a campfire for $10,000. That's a little bit overkill there, but a city can't clean up a house that's burned down for $10,000. Just not going to happen. And the insurance company says, don't get between me and my customer. I understand that. We're already between you and your customer. It's certainly a matter of degree now, right? So I pushed that through, and then it got killed in committee, which a lot of bills get killed in committee. 2,000 some bills, I think, presented this year. And maybe a couple hundred of them will made it through the funnel process, and may ultimately get signed. But we get a lot of calls. I don't know, maybe Brian doesn't, but I sure do. Get a lot of calls from people very upset about a particular bill that has no chance in the world of ever getting past the writing stage. Won't make it to subcommittee. If it makes it to subcommittee, it won't get through the committee. If it makes it through the committee, it won't get through the Senate floor. There's a lot of process between start and finish that would keep a bill from getting through. Brian mentioned if you run out of Busch Light, what do you do? And I say, if you run out of Busch Light, you drink real beer. But that's just me. I haven't seen the Prevent China ownership yet, but I would be in support of that in principle anyway. And there's a lot of things that I'm in support of in principle until you see the writing, right, and really understand exactly what this bill does. And sometimes stuff slides past you, like happened last year, I think, with in the back of the blue bill, something slid past us on the sheriff's salaries, and it caused some havoc in this county and a lot of other counties, and I'd like to see us correct. We're past the school funding thing now, which is done. It's required to be done within 30 days of the governor's State of the State address. The House has their tax bill in place. Our tax bill is through the committee, but not through the Senate yet, and that will come up, I'm sure, this coming week. There are some differences in those two plans, and I think we're going to talk about some of those things here in a few minutes. But trying to think of all my notes here if there's anything else I want to talk about. Now let's go from there and try to answer the questions that you have. And again, thank you so much for being here today. Hopefully we can answer your questions. Good.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, with that, I'd like to open up questions from the audience. Please state your name and where you're from and your question.
It's church.
Hi, Mike William Beaver, just representing myself. Since you kind of brought it up, talk about the tax bills and the differences between the House and Senate.
Okay, so I actually have a nice little sheet here on the differences between the House and the Senate. So individual income tax. Last year, the high rate of individual income tax was 8.53% on incomes above $75,000. That changed this year. You'll see it. You'll see the 8.53% on the taxes you're working on right now for last year, and it's down to 6% for next year already. The governor had requested a 4% flat tax starting in year 2026, and that's what the House Republicans have passed on their side of it, as far as I know. And the Senate Republicans are looking at 3.6%, but it gets into 2027. So I think we're in line, pretty well in line through 2026, and then the Senate Republicans take one more chunk out of it in 2027. On the corporate income tax, that's where we're really all over the board. The governor asked for 5.5%. The House Republicans said no change. They're keeping it at 9.8%. and Senate Republicans have it in the middle of the road at 7.8, which gets down to 7.8 by tax year 2028. Some mixed emotions on the corporate income tax rate. Well, let me back up. The individual tax rate, we're too high. I mean, we are one of the highest tax states in the country. And if you look at all the states surrounding us, every state except for Minnesota has a lower income tax than we do. South Dakota is 0. Minnesota has a higher tax rate, but the level of income is also a lot higher. So we're at $75,000, 8.53%, and they're at $150,000 to get to that level, right? So we have a much higher tax rate here. The only states that are really bigger, higher taxes than Iowa are California, New York, New Jersey, a couple other states like that. Who wants to be, how great to be in that group of states that we would be that high tax. So we're trying to get back in line and make Iowa a better place for people to live and keep their earnings to themselves. The corporate tax rate, I got some mixed emotions on that. The 7.8% I think is somewhat of a compromise on it. Honestly, the corporations haven't come to the table and talked. Let's see, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm at a loss for words here. They want their cake and eat it too, right? So they want the lower tax rate at 5.5%, but they want to keep all their credits, and the two just don't go together, right? So either they're going to have a corporate tax rate that fits for everybody, or is as reasonably close to fitting for everybody as possible, or not, and they want both. So the Senate one's in the middle of the road, and there's some argument to be had there yet. Retirement income is exempted on all three bills, and Illinois doesn't have any taxes on retirement income, but Iowa still tax you at the same rate as everybody else does. Farm income. There's a one-time election for farm owners over 55 to exempt cash rent income in lieu of capital gains tax. That's the same across all three. Sales tax, there's no change in the governor's plan, no change in the House Republicans' plan. The Senate Republicans have an interesting, I think it's somewhat ingenious almost, but an interesting way of taking the local option sales tax back to the state and then remitting to the local areas that 1 cent. The issue is here that if you buy something from like Amazon online, Amazon's pretty good at paying 6% to the state and taking the other percent and paying it to the local municipalities that are required, but most other places don't do that. And so there's about $50 million a year that the state loses out on internet sales that would otherwise go to Carroll. The question there is, once the state takes that 1 cent local option sales tax, will it get back to where it's supposed to go? And having just gotten through the backfill process last year, it's fresh in everybody's mind that, hey, you promised us something once and taken it away, and there's some argument over that. It's true. I mean, there's nothing that Brian and I could vote on today that a legislature next year couldn't unvote on. And so we make this change. I don't think there's a political will, honestly, to undo it or to keep you folks from getting the 1 cent back, but never's a long time, right? So it's a legitimate concern. I just think it's kind of ingenious because by doing this, we get the extra money, and it automatically invokes the I will, the 3/8 of a cent that everybody voted on. It's in the Constitution. It says the next 1 cent sales tax increase, 3/8 of a cent goes to the Waters and Land Legacy. And I'm calling you a second here. So 3/8 of a cent goes back to them without actually raising sales taxes. So that's the difference in the plans. There's a taxpayer relief fund. I could spend hours talking about this, and I apologize. I'm kind of taking over the thing here. Brian probably has some comments, and there's a question over here. Go ahead.
I think you explained it about as well as anybody could. I don't know if I want to add a whole lot to it, so we can just move on to another question.
I'll add one.
Could I speak on this real quick?
Certainly, please. Just state your name.
I'm Barb Liddendorf, but I'm just curious. You spoke about House Republicans and the House Senate. What is the other party?
The Senate Republicans and the House Republicans,
Well, yeah,
and the governor.
What are the Democrats wanting to provide? I'm not understanding what their view on this is.
To be honest with you, it's not in my committees, and I haven't heard what the Democrats have had to say on it. I did listen to the committee meeting on this particular bill on the Senate side, but I really don't know what the Democrats have offered other than more spending.
So we have no way of comparing what you're.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. I don't have it with me.
Chase Warden, question. So can you define retirement income if they defined what that means as far as IRA distributions or IPERS paychecks or Social Care? What's the definition of retirement income they're using?
Chase, I think you got a couple of years before you need to worry about that. I hope you.
I'm worried about you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot, Sonny. I don't know the details on that. There's so much detail in this. This is a big bill. It's a very big deal, and so I'm sorry, I don't know the answer.
Barb and from Carol. And I did have a quick question that I'd like to address to both of you in regard to education. And I know that you've come to 2.25% for new money.
2.5.
Oh, you did go to 2.5. Okay, you went to 2.5. Thank you. That last I heard it was 2.25. So I appreciate that. But I guess my question to you is, if we want to get a good quality of education and continue in the state of Iowa, we're failing our teachers. We're failing their income. We're failing the number of teachers that are going into education. And, you're talking about, what is good for us and what hurts people. I think the education profession right now is feeling degraded as far as one of the things, I'm not sure if it went through or not, one of the things was to allow a person with a 4-year degree and be 26 years old to take a praxis test and go ahead and be a teacher. Did that go through?
I don't know. It's in the Education Committee. I heard about it, but I don't know.
Okay, so there's something that I feel is degrading to the profession of teachers. The fact that all of a sudden it just lowers the expectations of what any of us expect for our children to have in school. What we expect from a quality teacher anymore. And my solution, and what is the solution? We know what the solution is. The solution is to pay teachers better. The solution is to give them an income that they can, support their families and go and do things, with their families and things. So I think it's a real critical problem, and I feel bad for the profession of teaching. One of the things is that, are we going to let someone that's good with gun safety take a test and say you can be a policeman? Are we going to do that? Are we going to say that someone who's taking a holistic course in medicine can be a nurse? I think we're really going down a twisted road here with this. And I think our solution is that we need to get young people to go back into education, and it's not happening. And we're just kind of watering down the whole system, and I'm very concerned about it. And I wish that the state of Iowa, I know the Democrats wanted 5% towards it, and we ended up with 2.5, which is a minimal increase for any teacher that has an education degree. So I am feeling bad. I'm basically done with my teaching career. It's not going to affect me, but there's a new generation of teachers in there. If we truly care about democracy, we want to educate all students the best that we possibly can. And I'm not sure where you are with the taxing on private schools versus public education. So I wish one of you would address that as well. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
Okay, there's a lot to talk about there. I think, I don't disagree with anything you're saying as far as teachers. I do believe that they deserve a good salary, they got a tough job. I think that the tough part is the K through 12, along with all the education, secondary, community colleges. It's over 50% of our budget as a state. And so when a 2.5 increase takes place, that equals, I believe it was around 179 million new dollars that we put into education. So, to be honest, Medicaid, I believe, has become a higher and higher percentage of our state budget. all these things are competing. We try to give education as much as we can, and I believe over the past years since I've been in there, I know there's been times when we've had to actually de-appropriate from some of the different budgets in the state of Iowa due to the commitment we made the year previous, and the REC estimates didn't come in as high as we thought they would, so we ended up having less money to spend than what we thought we would. We never de-appropriated from education. We always gave education what we said we would. And so I think we do make, I think we understand that it is important. The state of Iowa too, we're in a competitive market. States compete with other states for business, for keeping their citizens there, and it's a tightrope between trying to have enough money to take care of all Iowans, and sometimes we don't do it as well as I hope we can, and that's just where it's at. I do believe, and you asked the question about vouchers. I guess is what you're asking, if we support that system or not. I've been on record in the past as saying that I have grave concerns over what vouchers would do to schools in the area, the smaller schools who are already hurting because they're just hurting for have enough students to keep them viable. So I've been against it in the past, and I haven't really seen the particulars of what is going on with the governor's idea of some changes that might be made, but unless I see some pretty big changes, I wouldn't be in favor.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm coughing over here. Thanks for your question, and Brian, thanks for your answer. Go ahead, thank you. If you wouldn't mind grabbing me a water, that'd be wonderful. So the teacher shortage issue is not unique to Iowa. There's 3 million teachers in the NEA, and a report from, I wish I get talking points from the legislature. I don't get any, so I have to do all my own research on this stuff, right? So 3 million teachers in the NEA, and pre-pandemic, we had 567,000 more educators than we do today. Something happened during the pandemic where a lot of people quit. I don't know if they all retired, got tired of it, quit, whatever. But that's a fact, so it's not just an issue for Iowa, it's an issue everywhere. I went through and I charted out a nice little chart here on how much funding the state has put in per pupil over the last decade plus, and then posted that against inflationary figures. And we have been above or right at inflation all the way up until this year. This year is a blip. In 2023, it should actually get back into line with inflationary numbers. So the state puts $7,400 with this bill, and by the way, we kind of talked about that. The Senate proposal was 2.25% plus a $10 fee, and the House proposal was 2.5% plus $5. And the difference between those two is about $10 million. So the Senate just adopted the House bill and moved on. Strange to say that we didn't want to quibble over $10 million, but when you've got $3.5 billion going into education, $10 million is quibbling, right? Brian was right. 44% of the entire budget. So every dollar that comes in, 44 cents of it goes to K-12 education out of the state. And then, of course, all the locals and federal pay into those pots as well. So a considerable amount of money is going to K-12 education. And if you add in the universities and DMAC, et cetera, we're up to 55% of the budget is in education. Teacher pay, and I don't besmirch anybody for making whatever money they make, but teachers today, the average teacher in Iowa earns $61,000 a year, plus some pretty good benefits, plus time off in the summer and other time off. They've got good retirement benefits, great health care benefits, etc. The average family in Iowa makes $62,000. So we're saying that the average teacher makes one teacher makes about the same as the average family of the kids that they're teaching. So I know that there's a lot of emotion around how much money should they make, etc. Make as much as you can. but I think we're funding it pretty well. Again, the amount of money that we're putting into it is $7,413 per kid. We fund kids, right? We're worried about the education of the kids, and there's other things that go around about this school needs this and that school needs that, and those are different issues. We fund kids, $7,413 a year. And every year for the last 12 years, we've added to it. The last time that school funding got cut was in 2010. And that was Culver administration, where they overpromised, underdelivered, and had to pull back $170 million or something to that effect. So, the 2.5% difference between what we have agreed on and what the Democrats have asked for would add another $300 million. That 2.5% adds up to $300 million. And so we didn't do it. And I'm okay with that. I mean, should it be a lot more than that? I don't know, but I think we're doing okay. I don't think we're hurting our teachers as bad as the teachers would like us to say.
Thank you. Yeah.
My name is Sue Galing. I want to say thanks to DMAC and Brian and Craig, both of you, for giving us the opportunity to bring some of our issues to your attention. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner here in Carroll, and I specialize in children's mental health services. And so as such, I prescribe a variety of different medications for kids who struggle with different mental health conditions, anything ranging from ADHD to anxiety, depression, everything in between. And I'm here to talk about an insurance practice that not only creates undue administrative burdens on healthcare providers, but more importantly, it negatively impacts the lives of patients and their families. And that practice is called non-medical switching of prescription medicines. So insurance companies do this to cut costs and increase profits. But there's no medical reason for that practice to occur. The insurance companies don't ask the providers if this is in the best interest of the patient before they make these changes in their formulary. This week alone, I had 5 different pediatric patients who are stable on their ADHD medicines. Now suddenly, the insurance company is denying the medication that they previously had paid for. Yesterday alone, our staff spent 2 hours just to help one family get their daughter's ADHD medication approved, and we were unsuccessful. This family has Blue Cross Blue Shield as primary coverage, and they have Iowa Medicaid as secondary coverage. So theoretically, they shouldn't have to pay anything for this child's medications. But because of this non-medical switching of the medications, this family is going to have to pay $350 a month until they meet their $3,000 deductible for prescriptions. This family can't afford it. They're the working poor. Thankfully, they have commercial insurance. It doesn't pay anything, and now Medicaid changed their formulary, so it won't pay for anything either. So as a result, we had no other option but to change this child's medication. They probably won't do as well. Their academic performance is probably going to be affected, and it makes a difference. It's impacting the child and their family. So my question for you is, will you work to end this non-medical switching of medications here in Iowa? I believe there's some current bills that are active, and I gave a copy to both of you.
I'll hit it first here because I was involved in the non-medical switching, and there was another bill that Brian talked about earlier on the PBM, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Manager, and we're trying to get these two things wrapped together. The Senate file on this died, and it was my committee. It died there because we're going to try to get it into this other bill. I don't know what the status is of House File 656. It's not an easy issue to deal with. It's very easy for us to say, insurance companies, we're going to dictate for you how to do your business, and then there's a cost factor on top of that, so that has to be considered. And honestly, it's really hard to figure out because you have some very good points, and they have some very good points. Somewhere in the middle probably is the answer, but I'm not a physician. I don't completely understand it. I know what I've read, but it's a tough one. So the PBM one definitely has legs and is going to get through probably on both sides of it. Whether or not this is a part of it or not, I don't know. But
I've think this has come through the House, HHR, or Human Resources, when I was on that committee. I believe we voted through committee, but it just never got to the floor, or maybe it got past the floor, but never got through the Senate. That's a bill that I am 100% in agreement with. I think it does need to be done. I think there are situations where maybe a person could be switched to a lesser expensive drug, but I think we have to accept professional opinions on that. And so, for that reason, you know, to me, it just makes sense. And all the information I get is anecdotal, but I know that there's people that and families that have come to me and said, hey, we had no choice. And especially with psychotropic drugs and things like that, it's a very delicate balance to make everything work right for that person. So I'm in favor of that concept for sure.
It's a tough issue. I mean, I've got a brother who's an epileptic, right? And the medications for epilepsy are a brew, right? I mean, there's no drug that actually controls it. They use a cocktail of different drugs and try to find the right thing. And once that person is stabilized, you try to keep them stabilized. And then something comes along and poof, now we got to start all over again. That's a real problem for people. Totally understand it.
Thanks. Kyle Newbling, cardiologist here in town. Speaking for myself. So Senator Williams, I'm going to push you a little further though, because you said this was in your community, so you did get the information presented to you. We can get, well, they're hard to find, but you can get Wellmark's 990s. Other than they don't want to spend more money, what was the data presented to you to say that this is not a good idea?
Data was about that thick, so I could give it to you if you'd like it.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I trust you for some highlights of other than they don't want to pay more money, what was the reason?
It's like, do you have a son that goes to Kemper?
I do.
8th grade?
Yeah.
All right, he wrote me a really cool letter, had a picture of his
By the
hand.
way, that was a great way to get me to be really quiet, right? Real quick.
All distraction and diversion.
He wrote it.
Well done, because that was a great way to...
He wrote on his letter a picture of his hand and said, high five me and save my signature here because someday it'll be worth millions of dollars. I thought that was awesome. Yeah, I mean, the data was thick and it's complicated. I am not an expert in this area, and so, you know, I don't want to kick the bucket over to the guys on the other bill, but it died in our committee, and we were asked to try to get it into the PBM bill.
So I'll credit, though, the House Human Services Committee, Chairman Meyer, unanimous bipartisan support for it. So, I mean, the House gave it a very good seal of endorsement.
And if I can just add, Craig, that the insurance companies can show how much money that's going to save them, but what happens is problems develop in these patients. You know, this is impacting patients, and then they go to the emergency room more often, or it's impacting the school setting, or, you know, they have a hospitalization as a result. Are those dollars calculated into the return on investment of saving this money up front?
I don't believe they are,
Right.
but
They're not.
and I would say, you know, there still would be some hope because since it did get through a House, I'm assuming it still has the ability to go over to the Senate and be voted on. So I mean, we'll see what happens. I know it's something that we bring up every year. Sometimes it just takes time, and I'm sure we'll get it at some point.
A lot of bills end up with companion bills, right? The same thing is over on the House side as on the Senate side. And if it fails on one side, it can get passed and then comes back over again anyway. I mean, these things crisscross like that a lot of times. This is going to be one of those deals. I think we're passed through the House and it'll get to the Senate and we can talk about it a lot further. It's not dead. Okay.
Very good. We change tacks a little bit and talk about workforce. I know it's a subject that's very important to a lot of us here. Do you believe Iowa is in need of diversity programs that could help grow the population and fill jobs that we're struggling to fill currently?
I would have a question. I mean, such as what? I wonder what diversity programs would draw more folks here. And I'm honest question. What kind of programs is in mind when this question was asked? I mean, the entire country has a workforce shortage, including states that have much better diversity than we do. So if we had a better diversity program, are we going to attract more people from states that also have a shortage? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to just attract more people, and hopefully it's diverse, and if it's not, I'm okay with that too. I don't know how to answer that question without a little bit more detail. Brian?
I agree with Craig. I think we're open to anything that'll bring more people to the state of Iowa, and if that would help, that would be fine. I don't know that we have any kind of a formal program right now in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, if somebody would come to us with some ideas or what you're thinking about there, I'm more than happy to listen to them and see what we can do.
Well, sometimes tied to workforce is childcare. And childcare has been a hot topic, of course, not only in Iowa, but through the U.S. The state's seen many bills offered on this issue. What are some of your priorities on the childcare issue, and how will that help childcare here in Carroll County?
One thing, I'd say that the things that we did in the last few years have been high priority for everybody down at the State House. Democrats, Republicans, pretty much a bipartisan effort. And, one thing that I think was very helpful, hoping that it was getting rid of the cliff effect that we had, in that if you took 5 extra hours, worked a little overtime, then you lost all of your child support, or your help with that from the state. So they would just cut off all the funding, and so you were at a huge net loss by doing that. So it did not reward work. It kind of said, if you're working, well, if you're working a certain amount of hours, or once you hit that dollar amount in income, then you lose all of that. So we got rid of the cliff effect, which is more of a staggered thing, which I think was a great idea. I think that we're realizing that childcare isn't only something that is needed for other reasons, other than the fact that it's an economic development tool. And so that's how I see it. Whatever we do will come back, I believe, to the state. The fact that there'll be more taxpayers out there, there'll be folks that want to work. There's folks that once they have that second or third kid, or maybe even the first kid, I don't know. At some point, the dollars just don't it doesn't make sense for them to work, because childcare has become a very expensive thing, and so I'm just supportive of anything we can do that will bring money back. And I think a lot of the efforts we made were helpful for rural Iowa too. Glidden just built a brand new childcare place right there on the school grounds. So it's got some, it's real helpful. The school's going to be helping out, and most of that money, a lot of that money came from the state. I believe it had to be a matching. So as long as the community is bought into it, and then they've got community support, I think it's great for the state to help out as well.
Yeah, I think, the workforce shortage and childcare kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, a lot of people don't come back to work because they've got kids at home, and it doesn't make sense at the cost that they're paying for childcare. I know the governor had issued several childcare challenge fund type of ideas over the last couple of years, well, let me say first, there's no quick answer to this, right? I mean, this is something that has taken a while to get here, and it's probably going to take a while to get out of it. But they did $3 million appropriation this year to jumpstart the Child Care Challenge Fund, which is a matching grant to encourage employers and others to work together on solutions. There's Child Care and Development Block Grants. I think there's a $25 million startup fund to address child care deserts, places where there is no child care or very limited child care. There's $7 million for wages fund to offer salary stipends to that workforce that would be in child care. There's another $38 million for monthly stipends to facilities offering care to child care assistance families. The one that was kind of interesting in here is an increased eligibility for child care tax credits. And I don't know how that gets impacted with the tax changes that we're making, because we're bringing the taxes down and getting rid of a lot of the credits. So we got one program that adds credits and another program that takes them out. So everything just sort of gets kind of twisted around. I do think it's obviously an issue that needs a a lot of attention, and we're trying to give it to it. I just don't think there's a fast answer to it. We do have some weird stuff in our laws. We got a lot of weird stuff in our laws, right? But so here's one. Brian and I live next to each other, and we both have a child care thing in our house, and he's got 5 kids in his place, and I've got 5 kids in my place, and operating independently. And we say, you know what, we should get together and have a child care center here. So the 2 of us get together. Now, you know how many kids we can have in our child care thing? 5 total, not 10, 5. Maybe that makes sense, but it's one of those things that's kind of a head scratcher as to why it's okay for one person to cover 5 kids, but 2 people can't cover 10. It's a little weird. Maybe we could resolve some of those types of issues. We really need to get some more input from people who have child care in their homes. I see on Facebook a lot, people in Facebook Marketplace is an interesting place with it. But going out of business, right? Child care centers, getting rid of all of my stuff. And I always want to, why? I've actually sent some emails to people. Why are you going out of business? What's the impetus here? I haven't gotten any great answers back yet, but I don't have an answer for this one other than here's some proposals that we had. Are they going to fix it? Probably not. Are they going to, maybe long term we can get it fixed, but it won't be tomorrow.
Thank you. With our time kind of winds down here, maybe we can touch on agriculture and energy a bit. The House has recently passed the E15 bill that the Senate's now considering. Did you or do you plan to support this bill, and why? Is mandating E15 at the pump overstepping and harmful to local gas stations?
I'll start. I didn't attend a meeting that Brian attended here the other day. I didn't know about it until late. I think Brian went to Fuels Iowa, had an interesting program, and I've got their information. Haven't read through it all yet. I'll say that I am, like last year, I am in favor of E15 as a theoretically, but where the rubber meets the road in this bill, there's some issues. Now, last year's bill, this year's bill is far better than last year's bill, but I see that there's still some serious issues, like there's money in there for a gas station to change one pump. Well, typically there's a tank underneath the ground, and that tank feeds 4 or 5 pumps, not one. They got money to change the one and not the other pumps, but you have to change the other pumps because the tank has got something different in it. So I think there's something called the Casey's Amendment that's coming through that it's named after Casey's gas station because of that particular issue. So again, in theory, I'm in favor of E15. I'm not a big fan of the term mandate or forcing gas stations to make changes. I would sure like to see us offer some incentives and good credits. I think there's some other ideas that are on the table for making the small gas stations whole. I tell you, I talked with one in a small town in Audubon County who said, I'm just going to get out of business here because I don't want to deal with this anymore. If I change my pumps on the top, I have to change something underneath, and as soon as I touch underneath, then I've got to change my tanks, and the DNR is involved, and I'm just out of business, so I'm done. We don't want that. We don't want that. We want everybody to stay in business and promote ethanol at the same time.
Yeah, the bill that we're talking about passed the House, I think with 81 votes. I voted for it, and now I find myself doing everything I can to change which is ironic. I have to admit that it was almost, you're at a situation where you have to support the farmers. I'm not saying you have to, but you're put in a position where on these types of votes, what would help the farmers and what would help Iowa's economy from the standpoint of more corn being consumed through E15, which is a good thing. But then what it did to the small gas stations and convenience stores in the state of Iowa, I think, is probably a little bit of overreach. This is the one time, and I very seldom will vote for a mandate. I did. So now I find myself going over to the Senate and talking to Craig and talking to a senator that has a fuel station by the name of Adrian Dickey. He understands the situation. So I've had conversations with him trying to get the bill, which has good intentions, it needs some work, and I'll be the first one to admit that.
It needs some work, but I think there's a lot of merit to it. We just got to mitigate some issues with these smaller gas stations. We do not want to put these people out of business.
Okay, as we close for today, I just want to give both of you one more opportunity. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up that we have not touched on as of yet? Any other questions from the audience?
I will say one thing. When it comes to, there was a question said, what is the state of Iowa doing, or what other states are we looking at when we compare our tax policies? Ironically, the state that I think we're looking at a lot in the House is Kansas, and that would tell us how not to do it because they had a really bad experience. They overreached. They put themselves in a really bad position. So you probably expected us to find a model that really works well, but sometimes it's good to look at the models that didn't work so well. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, one interesting one that we passed through in the Senate the other day that probably doesn't impact anybody, but you know that Iowa is like the only state anywhere around here that you can't buy milk from a farmer legally. I mean, you can both be arrested. And even in California, you can get raw milk out of a vending machine, but you can't do that here in Iowa. Anyway, I think it's kind of an interesting one. That one passed through the Commerce Committee the other day to allow a farmer to sell milk and a buyer to buy milk.
One more question? Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick,
Art?
Marvin Dorf again. I'd just like to say that, when you, back to education, I'm sorry, this is a big problem. But anyway, you said 61,000 is the average. You know, what's the average for Western Iowa?
So the average in Western, I actually have those figures here, but so in Carroll it's about 55,000. I think in Crawford it is a little over 60,000. BV is about 59 or 60,000. Cost of living here is a lot less than it is in Des Moines. Carroll is the only county where the average family income is higher than the average teacher income. Average family income is higher than the average teacher income. In all the other counties in my district, it's the other way around.
Okay, I used to teach at Carroll, and I'm at Rapids now, but
Mm-hmm.
I made $52,000, and I taught 47. Saying that it's not, you know, somebody's.
Yeah, I'm dealing with averages, and I'm sorry if that's your case, but
In
that's.
the summer, many teachers have extra jobs. In the summer as well.
Sure.
Okay, on that, thank you both, Senator Williams and Representative Best. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I'd also like to thank DMAC. Joel, thank you so much for hosting us. To remind everybody, if you'd like it to